Okay, here we go. Lights, camera, action. Welcome. Thanks for being here. This is session number 71. We're in chapter 9 in the text, section 7, Roman numeral 7, VII, entitled The Two Evaluations. Okay, on page 175. All right. And remember, the main thrust, once again, is the acceptance of the atonement. That's the name of the chapter. And the atonement is realizing you never left the mind that thought of you. You never turned your back on wholeness. You never turned your back on the oneness. All right? You never sinned, as they say. All right? You never separated from the milieu in which totality exists. Okay? So, that's what Jesus will refer to as reality. The reality is you're not separated, and that's where you are. All right? You know, they say it in different ways. You know, you are at home in God, dreaming of exile. Okay? Another place, Jesus says your other life continues, which means that you are with your Creator, creating as the Creator does, by extending everything. Okay. The two evaluations. God's will is your salvation. Would he not have given you the means to find it? If he wills you to have it, he must have made it possible and easy to obtain it. Your brothers are everywhere. You do not have to seek far for salvation. Every minute and every second gives you a chance to save yourself. Do not lose these chances, not because they will not return, but because delay of joy is needless. God wills you perfect happiness now. Is it possible that this is not also your will? And is it possible that this is not also the will of your brothers? Okay. So this perfect happiness that God wills for us, all right, that is in the abstract state of reality, all right, where there is only eternal bliss. All right. The best we could do here is to have that reflected, right? That happiness, right? With working on forgiveness, working on salvation, right? Working on accepting the atonement, all synonymous, right? Our perception of the world as we wander through it, it gets a little lighter. We understand more. We become happier. Jesus will refer to the happy dream, okay, where we're still in the world, still in some sort of form, but we are happier. All right? He says that is not the focus. All right? It's just something that happens, all right, before it's okay for us to rejoin the mind of God, so to speak, or become aware of it. All right? So it says, you know, we do become happier along the way, but this is not what he's talking about, is that God's will for you is perfect happiness. God's will for you is in the mind, right, in that spacious awareness, right, of which the Buddha was aware, of which Jesus was aware, right, and countless other teachers have reached that awareness, okay, in which they are perfectly happy, okay? But he says God's will is your salvation. reality. Salvation is the release from this perception, a release from this belief system that we are separated from God. All right? That's what we believe right now. And that's why we find ourselves uncertain, lonely, and in constant fear. All right? So God's will is your salvation, the release from the dream. And would he not have given you a means to find it? Okay? That means to find it is that the right mind, that spot in the right mind where the memory of who we are resides. Okay? And we get to that, well, let's just look on. He goes, he gives you the means to find it. If he wills you to have it, he must have made it possible and easy to obtain. And here's the way to obtain it. Your brothers are everywhere. Okay? So it's the idea of forgiveness. It's the idea of asking, being willing to see the innocence in your brother. All right? Being willing to see that, being willing to have your perception changed. All right? We stop projecting guilt onto our brother. All right? And that's another way in which our brother helps us with salvation, is that we get to see which guide am I listening to, which thought system is influencing me here. Is it the thought system of separation, which is the ego, which will have me projecting guilt in all different ways, all right? And after a while, after so many lifetimes, you realize it doesn't work. It doesn't make you feel better, right? It doesn't lift whatever self-hatred and criticism you might have, all right? But that's how our brother helps us. They become the mirrors of what our thought system is. Who am I using as a guide? All right, so my brothers are everywhere. And you don't have to seek far for salvation. Every minute and every second gives you a chance to save yourself. All right? And that's it. You check your thoughts. Check your thoughts. You could stop yourself at any point during the day and just look at what you're thinking. Right? Was it a criticism? Was it a way of getting something that you think you need? Was it a self-criticism? Was it some kind of resentment or anger? Okay. I know that personally, my mind, if I have nothing obvious going on in my thoughts, my mind, which is like a slot machine, you pull the handle and all these thoughts go around and bing, it stops on one. And there it is. It's something from 40 years ago. In my imagination, as if it's happening right now, and with the accompanying emotions, fear, anger, criticism, whatever. All right. So at any moment, at any point during the day, every moment, every second, you could stop, see what thought system you're using. All right. And then you have a choice. Do I want to continue with the ego thought system, with that thought system of separation, or do I want to go and ask in my right mind, help me to see this correctly, joining with the right mind, corrected perception, okay? And with enough practice at doing that, the dream does become a little happier. Your interpretations of what's happening, right? Nobody's saying you're going to, hit the lotto or, meet your soulmate or, live in a castle or whatever, or even a yurt if you like yurts, whatever is your dream. Doesn't mean the form is going to be all worked out. All right? It just means that your interpretation of your circumstances are going to be okay. You're okay. All right? As Krishnamurti would say when I asked him, what's your secret? He said, my secret is I'm okay with whatever happens. Okay? It's a good place to be. I'm okay with whatever happens. All right? So you don't have to seek far for salvation. Our brothers and sisters will mirror to us what thought system we're using, and at that point we have a choice. All right? We can continue on, right, with the ego thought system, or we can decide against it and say, no, I don't want that. I want to see my brother, my sister, the situation, even myself. I want to see myself correctly. Right? That's the opportunity for salvation. Okay? And it's not, he says, that not that if you don't grab the chance you're going to lose it. He says, they're constantly coming around. Okay? And if you live long enough and you're introspective enough, you can look back and see that a lot of the major occurrences in your life, they keep happening, you know? There used to be that TV show which would say, only the names have changed to protect the innocent. But that's what happens. The form remains the same. There might be a different looking person or a different looking malady or something, you know what I mean? But they recur. They recur. And these are the major things, you know. All during the day we can stop and check ourselves and choose to be guided. You know, even if I'm dealing with the sales rep at the cash register, right? I could choose, help me to see this correctly, right? And go on my way. Okay? So the chances are always there. Okay? And he says that he wills perfect happiness for you. And so he says, so is it possible that it's not your will? Reminding us that our will is the same as God's. All right? And our brother's will is the same, because there's only the one, the oneness. Deep down inside, everybody is the same. Everybody is one. All right? We perceive many. And as Ken used to say, a good place to start is to just realize that everybody has the same need, the same basic need, which is to escape from this dream that we're having. All right? I mean, you could walk down the street, you know, and this way I'm blessed by living in a place where the streets are always busy. You can just see on people's faces. You can see the struggle. You can see on some people you can see the stress, the worry, the anger, the fear. All right? And it's just people trying to get from point A to point B. All right? Jesus says deep down inside, everybody has the same need. All right? Which is the peace of mind and then the release from the dream. Okay? So, it's everybody's will, actually, is to be happy. Paragraph 2. Consider then that in this joint will, you're all united, and in this only. There may be disagreement on anything else, but not on this. This, then, is where peace abides, and you abide in peace when you so decide. Yet you cannot abide in peace unless you accept the atonement, because the atonement is the way to peace. The reason is very simple and so obvious that it is all often overlooked. The ego is afraid of the obvious, since obviousness is the essential characteristic of reality. Yet you cannot overlook it unless you're not looking. Okay? You cannot overlook reality unless you're not looking. And that's what we do here. We're not looking at reality. We turned our back on it. We dissociated from it. We dissociated from reality. All right? You are one with God. Oh no, that's not me. I'm out the door. Right? I'm hiding among the trees. All right? The ego is afraid of the obvious. The ego is afraid of reality. And Jesus says reality is obvious, okay, unless you're not looking, unless you have dissociated from it. But the ego thought system, who doesn't know anything about reality, really, it just knows about the individuation, the separation, constant separation, and achieving what it thinks it needs, just to prove that it has achieved separation. Okay? So once you get close to accepting the atonement, the ego quakes. Okay? So, and Jesus will tell us at some point that the ego has like two different states, two different gears, if you will. It has suspiciousness and viciousness. So it's always afraid because it relies on the power of the mind to choose it. So it's always afraid that it's going to be chosen against and it will disappear. And once you get close to making that decision, it gets nutty. So it retaliates, so to speak. Excuse me. So, consider then that in this joint will you're all united, and in this only. All right? There may be disagreement on anything else, but not on this. All right? This then is where peace abides. So at least there's our starting point. That everybody wants that same basic thing, that release from the struggle, right? The peace of mind. Okay. Yet you cannot, and you abide in peace when you so decide. All right. So there we have it. We have opportunities all day long. All right. There's an interaction with a person. At any given moment in that interaction, I might be reacting negatively, and then I have a decision to make. Do I want to continue in the ego reaction, or do I want peace? All right. If I want peace, I just have to truly desire peace. I don't need to figure out how to get that. All right. The answer will arise. And that's it. It's either that or do I want to continue the struggle? At one point, Jesus will utter those words that have now become kind of almost cliche in certain sections. Do you want to be right or happy? Okay. You have to decide. Do you want to be right or happy? I'm right. He did this to me. You owe me this, whatever. Or do you want to be happy? By asking very quickly, help me, which means help me to see correctly. I'm willing to see peace. I'm willing to see the innocence. In other words, I'm willing to accept the atonement. All right? Because giving and receiving are simultaneous in the mind. I'm willing to see the other's innocence. I automatically become aware of mine. All right, and there is peace. and you abide in peace when you so decide. Paragraph 2, chapter 5, sentence 5. Yet you cannot abide in peace unless you accept the atonement, because the atonement is the way to peace. The reason is very simple and so obvious it is often overlooked. Right? The ego is afraid of the obvious, since obviousness is the essential characteristic of reality. Yet you cannot overlook it unless you're not looking. All right? So we want to see peace. We're willing to see peace. We're willing to see innocence, the atonement. Okay? Because the atonement is the way to peace. Okay? I'm willing to see the peace. And you don't have to figure out what that looks like, what it sounds like. All right? You will be guided. Okay? Sometimes it's what I like to call loud thoughts. You get a loud thought. My wonderful friend Emily, who was my first teacher of Course in Miracles, she used to say, I wish the Holy Spirit had an accent so I could tell when it was him giving me the messages, when it was him guiding me, all right? But I like to say you get very clear thoughts, all right? So, and you cannot overlook the essential characteristic of reality, all right, unless you're not looking. Paragraph 3, it is perfectly obvious that if the Holy Spirit looks with love on all he perceives, he looks with love on you. His evaluation of you is based on his knowledge of what you are, and so he evaluates truly. And this evaluation must be in your mind, because he is. The ego is also in your mind, because you have accepted it there. Its evaluation of you, however, is the exact opposite of the Holy Spirit's. Right? Because the ego does not love you. It is unaware of what you are and wholly mistrustful of everything it perceives because its perceptions are so shifting. The ego is therefore capable of suspiciousness at best and viciousness at worst. This is its range. It cannot exceed it because of its uncertainty. And it can never go beyond it because it can never be certain. All right? The ego can never be certain because it depends on a choice. All right? The Son of God has to choose to believe he's separated. So the ego depends on that choice. So the ego has to keep us mindless, as Ken would say, keep us out of the mind with constant distraction so that we don't go to the mind where we might make the choice against the ego. All right? So the closer we get to the right mind, to joining with Jesus and Holy Spirit, the more agitated the ego becomes. Okay? And that's not a reason to be afraid of it. I have, in my early studies of the Course, I would say, God, I'm trying to do the lessons, and I feel like since I started the lessons, it's like there's more occasion to get in arguments. Where I would feel terrible after the argument, of course. But that's the ego wanted to keep itself going, all right? There's some parallel to it in what's taught these days by Eckhart Tolle, where he talks about the pain body. The pain body just wants to be fed, wants to be reinforced at all times. And I could see parallels with the pain body and the ego. All right, it just wants to be fed, and if it's not fed, it's going to get hungry. All right, it's going to look for occasions to reinforce itself. Okay, but the ego can never go beyond this suspiciousness or viciousness. That's it. All right, and the ego doesn't like you. Right? The ego doesn't love you. The Holy Spirit sees you and sees who you really are. All right? Jesus, the manifestation of the Holy Spirit, sees you as you really are. Right? Jesus tells you, he comes up with wonderful spiritual metaphysical pep talks from time to time in the book. And he'll just tell you how wonderful you are, but trying to put it into words. They'll describe you as great rays, right? You're just great rays, like sunlight, right? You are the light of the world, okay? So, the ego doesn't look at you like that, right? That's all the Holy Spirit sees. When he sees you, is your glory, all right? Your wonderfulness, all right? And he could see, the Holy Spirit understands, all right? So that's why he says he could take what you made and help you to remember who you are and use that to help you remember, okay? So his evaluation, the Holy Spirit's evaluation of you is based on his knowledge of what you are. All right? And so he evaluates truly. And here's something else to ponder. All right? So he knows who you are. He sees who you are. All right? And he evaluates because he knows. All right? He evaluates you truly. And this evaluation must be in your mind, because he is. So the Holy Spirit, who knows who you are, I like to refer to the Holy Spirit as the memory of who you are, is in your mind. Right? It's in your mind. The memory of who you are is in your mind. All right? And the idea is to go to that spot. I mean, Ken would say it's as easy as saying help. Insinuating that you want to change you want to have your perception changed. All right? You want peace. All right? I want to see through the eyes of love. Help. In that moment, you're joining with the memory of who you are. You're reaching into that. All right? And the idea is to keep practicing that until we're comfortable going there and staying there, right, for longer periods of time, all right, until we want to be there only and always, all right? And it's like Jesus would tell you, you can take your time, but he'll say, why wait? Why wait for heaven? Okay? Why would you put it off? Okay? He says the delay of joy is needless. But that's what we do. But don't let that stop you. All right? Keep going to have your perception changed. Okay? So, paragraph 4. You then have two conflicting evaluations of yourself in your mind, and they cannot both be true. Okay? You do not yet realize how completely different these evaluations are, because you do not understand how lofty the Holy Spirit's perception of you really is. Right? He is not deceived by anything you do, because he never forgets who you are. Okay? The ego is deceived by everything you do, especially when you respond to the Holy Spirit, because at such times its confusion increases. The ego is therefore particularly likely to attack you when you react lovingly, because it has evaluated you as unloving, and you are going against its judgment. The ego will attack your motives as soon as they become clearly out of accord with its perception of you. This is when it will shift abruptly from suspiciousness to viciousness, since its uncertainty is increased. Yet it is surely pointless to attack in return. What can this mean except that you are agreeing with the ego's evaluation of what you are? Okay? So, if we utilize attack in any way, we're just agreeing with the ego. Okay? So the ego is particularly likely to attack you when you're acting lovingly. Okay? And you'll get to see, if you haven't already, that it comes in those thoughts. You do something nice, and all of a sudden you get these thoughts that say, oh, well, you're pretty phony. You're just doing that so you can get this, or who do you think you are? You think you're better than us? All that stuff. The ego just gets right on the job. I have a friend who is helping his father. All right. His father's going through, crises, physical and mental crises, and my friend is helping him. It's his father. He wants to help. And, he gets to the point where in his mind, he does something good, he's helping his father, and then at night he's got this chatter that goes on in his head. Because he says, I need some time for myself and this and that. And then the ego goes, yeah, you're selfish. You're selfish, you just don't want to help your father. So the ego is going to get you coming and going. You're damned if you do and damned if you don't. All right? Oh, it just attacks. Doesn't want you to be nice. Doesn't want you to be loving. Okay? So, and there's nothing wrong with having time for yourself if you're helping, if you're a helper, if you're a caretaker. Whether you're watching your children or watching your family in some sense, or a friend, helping a friend, it's okay to take care of yourself. And my suggestion is always go inside and just ask, how do I see this situation correctly? How do I see it peacefully? How do I see it lovingly? Use the words don't matter. That part of your mind that is the Holy Spirit knows what you're asking for. All right? So how do I be kind? What does love look like? Right? How do I take care of myself? All right? Constantly go back to that part of your mind, especially when you can pick up on the idea that you're being criticized. All right? And it's whether it's self-criticism or somebody else is criticizing you. Okay? Because what we come to see at a certain point, that if somebody's saying something to you that is negative, some kind of negative criticism, it's probably a thought that was in your mind anyway. And it's a hurtful thing, I remember 30 years ago when someone just said to me, this is 30 years ago, okay? So someone was very, very angry at me. He said, that I failed at something, you know. And they just said, you're just a fat old man that can't get a job. All right. So, okay, I didn't say that to myself, but those thoughts echoed for years in my head. All right? And, you know, so these are outward manifestations of inward conditions here, you know? And they come to you all different ways, all right? And the idea is, how do I perceive this peacefully? You know, what does love look like? What does kindness look like? All right? And the ego tries to get you all different ways, all through your life. The ego doesn't have to wait to mature, okay? The ego is, it's born with us. It's fully accomplished, all right? It comes with this, just ready for us to put it into gear. Okay. And so, paragraph 5. So if you choose to see yourself as unloving, you will not be happy. All right? If you choose to listen to the ego, who tells you you're not loving, all right? You are condemning yourself and must therefore regard yourself as inadequate. Would you look to the ego to help you escape from a sense of inadequacy? All right? The sense of the inadequacy that it has produced and it must maintain for its existence. Can you escape from its evaluation of you by using its methods for keeping this picture intact? So whatever the criticism is, all right? Whatever you know, whatever message you're getting that is unloving. You know, you're too this, you're too that, you're not enough this, you screwed that up, whatever. Okay? Whatever. He says, you're condemning yourself and must therefore regard yourself as inadequate. There's something wrong with you. All right? That's the original thought. I did something wrong. Now there's something wrong with me. I'm lacking something. All right? Well, we turned our back on everything, so there has to be that sense of lack. But when, you know, it manifests throughout this experience here in all different ways, all throughout our lives. You know, can love to explain things musically. He's a great lover of classical music and opera, and he would say your life is like the opening notes of Beethoven's Fifth Symphony. All right, when you hear bum 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 bum, right, bum 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 bum, and then throughout the entire symphony, you can hear the repetition, the echoes of those notes. And that's what happens in our lives. Stuff happens. And similar stuff happens all through your life until we take the opportunity to say, how can I see this correctly? All right? Otherwise, the ego has us trapped. Because we're constantly looking for ego solutions to fix it, so to speak. As the Course would refer to as magical solutions to fix things. All right? A magical solution is anything that's outside of the mind. All right? When the true solution is going to that part of the mind that remembers who you are and says, how do I see this correctly? Right? How do I see this correctly? Right? I'll probably say that 5 million times. Okay. So, he says, so you're condemning yourself, and you must therefore regard yourself as inadequate. Then he says, would you look to the ego to help you? Would you look to the ego to help you escape this inadequacy? after all, it was the ego that gave you the sense of inadequacy. All right? And it has to maintain that inadequacy for its existence. It has to maintain the idea that there's something wrong with me, okay, in order for its existence, okay? The idea that there is nothing wrong with me is also a manifestation of the atonement. There is nothing wrong. I'm not lacking anything. I'm not vulnerable. I have everything. I am everything. I am more than adequate. All right? That's the atonement principle. Okay? And it's waiting for that moment when we choose to accept it. Okay? So he just says, can you escape from the ego's evaluation of you by using its methods for keeping this picture intact? So I get this constant thought in my life about my weight. Oh, you're this and that, you're this and that. So then I use ego methods to deal with that, okay? And they work for a while, all right? And then one day they don't work. And that period goes on for a long time, all right? All the time where I'm condemning myself for it. There's the opportunity to condemn myself, let's put it that way, okay? So there's that sense of inadequacy that the ego needs to keep me guilty, all right? And then I try to deal with it through ego methods, you know, the latest exercise, the latest diet, the whatever, you know? And it works for a while, but then it doesn't. Okay? Whereas to go to the right mind and just ask, how do I see myself correctly? How do I see myself correctly? Okay? Then hey, it doesn't mean that you have to stay in that condition, but you could and be happy. All right, but there just might be a different outlook on life that will help you. All right? It's different for everyone. The idea is to help me see correctly. Okay? So he says, why would you go to the ego to help you fix what the ego doesn't want you to fix? Okay? So, paragraph 6, you cannot evaluate an insane belief system from within it. Its range precludes this. You can only go beyond it and look back from a point where sanity exists and see the contrast. Only by this contrast can insanity be judged as insane. With the grandeur of God in you, you have chosen to be little and to lament your littleness. Within the system that dictated this choice, the lament is inevitable. Your littleness is taken for granted there, and you do not ask who granted it. The question is meaningless within the ego's thought system, because it would open the whole thought system to question. Okay? So all of a sudden you say, oh, I'm this, I'm that, I'm that. Where did I get that idea? Who said that I'm not the Son of God? Who said that? You know? And you could start working on the little things. Who said that I'm this? Who said that I'm that? Right? Who decided that? Right? Who is the judge here? Who made the rules? All right. This is within the ego thought system. You know, those are meaningless questions because it would open up the whole thought system to question, which is the beginning. All which is the beginning, a crack in the ego thought system, right? As Leonard Cohen would say, there's a crack in everything. That's how the light gets in, okay? So, and he says your littleness is just taken for granted. You know, it's like it's drummed into you throughout thousands of years of history. And he says you can't evaluate the system from within the system. So we have to come out of the system, and we do that by coming into the right mind. And it's as easy as saying, looking at the ego and saying, no, I don't want that. Help me to see correctly. You're in the right mind, right? You're looking at the ego without judgment. You're just saying, I just don't want that, right? I want to be peaceful, all right? And believe me, you're in the right mind in that instant, okay? And from that instant, later on, the text gets more and more beautifully poetic, and just written in such an exquisite language that, Jesus will use the term above the battleground. So in other words, we rise above the battleground and can look down on it and see the insanity and then decide, I don't want that. I want to be peaceful. How do I do that? All right. Help me to see through the eyes of peace. And Dr. Wapnick, I have a tendency to call him Ken all the time because he'd come over to me one day and we were talking, and he goes, so we're friends, right? I said, yeah. And everybody would call him Ken, except the ladies that worked at the foundation there. They would call him Kenneth, okay? But Ken would use the phrase, we're in the sandbox. All right, we're in the sandbox like little kids. And he threw sand at me, or he took my toy, and he pushed me over. He said, sooner or later, you just have to stand up. All right, just stand up and look around the sandbox. All right, and decide if you want to stay there. Okay, and then you make the choice. All right, I want to leave the sandbox. All right, I want to leave the battlefield. All right, I want to see correctly. Okay? So, but right now he's talking about littleness. And I believe this was especially poignant for Helen Schuckman. If anybody knows better, please message me, correct me. But I believe that Helen's father referred to her as the least and littlest. Okay? So she had that impression of herself. Okay? And so this is one way that Jesus is trying to help her with that. And you can see how it helps us. All right, because we don't have that thought that I am the Son of God. I share the grandeur of God. No, most of us walk around thinking there's something lacking, right? Something's missing. There's something wrong. Okay, unless you're a complete narcissist. Then you're just covering up that thought. All righty then. So in paragraph 6, let's look at sentence 5 in paragraph 6. He said, with the grandeur of God in you, you have chosen to be little and to lament your littleness. Within the system that dictated this choice, the lament is inevitable. All right. Your littleness is taken for granted. And you do not ask who granted it. The question is meaningless within the ego thought system because it would open the whole thought system to question. All right, so the ego would cover that question up very, very quickly. The ego doesn't want to be questioned. Okay. Paragraph 7. I have said that the ego does not know what a real question is. Lack of knowledge of any kind is always associated with unwillingness to know. And this produces a total lack of knowledge simply because knowledge is total. Not to question your littleness, therefore, is to deny all knowledge and keep the ego's whole thought system intact. You cannot retain part of a thought system because it can be questioned only at its foundation. And this must be questioned from beyond it, because within it, its foundation does stand. The Holy Spirit judges against the reality of the ego's thought system merely because he knows its foundation is not true. Therefore, nothing that arises from it means anything. He judges every belief you hold in terms of where it comes from. If it comes from God, he knows it to be true. If it does not, he knows that it is meaningless. Okay? So that's the Holy Spirit's evaluation. That's how he gets to that evaluation. Anything that comes from the ego is meaningless because he knows the foundation of the ego is untrue. It's meaningless. It's a lie. Right? The foundation of the ego thought system is separation, separated from the oneness. Right? Holy Spirit knows that's not true. So anything that follows from that thought is meaningless. All right? I separated from God. Oh, I'm lacking something. I'm diminished. Right? The Holy Spirit knows that none of that is true. All right? And that's why we have to start questioning everything. Everything we believe, we have to question. Okay? So Holy Spirit judges every belief you hold in terms of where it comes from. Okay? And if it's coming from the ego, it's meaningless. Right? No matter how big you think it is, no matter how important you think it is, it's meaningless. Okay? And when you're working the course, so to speak, when you're practicing these things, and it's cool. I mean, it's a nice theory. You know, you can argue intellectually at a cocktail party if you want, but its fruit, all right, is born when we practice. All right. Everything is theory until practice, as the Taoist master said. Everything is theory until practice. All right? And in practicing is when we get to see things become different, things become lighter. Okay? You start to lose that worried look on your face. Okay? And maybe even your relatives will say, what happened to you? You got a lot nicer. But anyway, that's enough personal stories. All right. So, and he says the ego does not know what a real question is. And later on, Jesus will say the only real question is, what am I? Okay? That's the question at the root, at the foundation of the ego. All right. Before that, Jesus will say there's an important question too. What is it for? Okay? But the ultimate question is, what am I? What am I? That shakes the ego thought system to its core. Okay? So he says the ego doesn't know a real question. To the ego, the questions all right, if you look at them, they're basically just statements, you know, restating the fact that I'm here, right? I'm here. I have to find out how I got here. We're going to take anthropology, right? What is this? You know, what is this on my arm? Okay, it's you know, basically at its foundation is, hey, I have an arm. I have a body. All right. So, paragraph 8. Whenever you question your value, say this: God himself is incomplete without me. Remember this when the ego speaks, and you will not hear it. The truth about you is so lofty that nothing unworthy of God is worthy of you. Choose then what you want in these terms, and accept nothing that you would not offer to God as wholly fitting. You do not want anything else. Return your part to him, and he will give you all of himself in exchange for the return of what belongs to him and renders him complete. Okay? So, that's the two evaluations. All right? The Holy Spirit's evaluation of you is that you are just the grandeur of God. Okay? And he says, remember that. He says, God is incomplete without you. You're part of the oneness. All right? You are that. All right? So, you do not want anything else. All right? And he will give you all of himself, all right, in exchange for the return of what belongs to him, which is you. All right? So return like the prodigal son. All right? And he will give him all of himself to you. And we can't even put into words what all of himself means. It's that wondrous spaciousness, that Christ consciousness, that Buddha consciousness, all right, that self-realization, some people call it. All right. All righty then. And the next section will continue with the idea of the grandeur versus grandiosity. Okay, so we will look forward to the next session. Well, I will anyway. All righty then. See you soon. Bye.